Hello and welcome to Diminishing Returns. It's part 3 of our Kevin Smith extravaganza. If you are just joining us now, then the last 2 weeks we've been looking at Kevin Smith's career. So this week we're dealing with the tail end of what is his current career. We're going to be starting with... what is it? Oh, we're going to be starting with Red State, then Tusk, and finally Yoga Hosers. If you want to listen to the rest of our Kevin Smith opinions, then, go back 2 weeks. But here is where we are. With me, Alan Turing, as always, is Saul Harris.
Michael
Parks.
What's he called? Michael Parks. What's he say? Something about Jesus. Jesus!
Okay.
Is not amused, son!
So that's Saul. And joining us today, a special guest, Scott Chambers.
Excellent. Swing.
That's the wrong.
That's Bill and Ted's World, isn't it? That's what he's directed.
Oh dear. We're not even at that portion of Kevin Smith's career.
I know there's
silly comedy career.
We've left the Askview universe. I can't even fucking pronounce it. Askview. That was it, wasn't it? The universe.
Askew.
And now he's created the Smodcast universe. The shitcast.
Yes. The Truenorth Trilogy is the one he's doing. Basically, after the colossal failure of Cop Out and Kevin Smith's terrible personal experience making it, he really kind of deserted the idea of making films with this big studios and stars. And he just wanted to make films by himself, a very kind of linear process, which, in a way I really respect. He has enough backing and enough clout that he could get away with it at the time. So that led him to making Red State. Red State, it didn't just come out of nowhere. He'd been planning it for a while as a way of doing something a little bit different.
But before we get onto Red State, Scott, don't you have a vaguely amusing anecdote about interacting with Kevin Smith on Twitter over Cop Out?
Oh.
Yeah. This is when I was new to Twitter, and I just thought it was a place just to harass celebrities. And
is that not what it is?
Kevin Smith did something not even related to Cop Out. I think he was saying about how he was writing his new movie. So I snarkily said, "Oh, as long as it's not Cop Out 2, then everyone will be happy." And then
genius comedy work there. No one ever thought of making that joke.
I know. And he actually replied, and he put, I'd do Cop Out 2 in a heartbeat if the studios were inclined. And then I just felt really awful, because it was like, he could have used that as a platform with all his followers to just sort of rip me a new one and be like, who the fuck are you? Like, what have you ever done? And then I just felt bad then, and I did get a load of his fans just attacking me. They just sort of spent like 4 hours just arguing with this guy from Iowa or something like that. Just sort of.
Surely no one was trying to defend Cop Out.
I don't get the impression Kevin Smith would do Cop Out 2 if people wanted him to now. I think he was probably putting on a brave face back then. That was probably...
He's got to do it with Bruce Willis.
I was going to say, he'd have to get Bruce Willis back on board first.
If he could do it, but like if he could replace Bruce Willis with the guy from Mallrats, the dad.
Michael Rooker.
Yeah.
I guess that could work.
No, if you were going to do Cop Out 2, it would be Tracy Morgan and Sean William Scott after he did Cop Out, and then just one negative tweet too many pushed him over the edge. So when making Red State, he kind of went a little bit off-piste, found more like private funding for it, very low budget, didn't really go through the big studios or anything like that. I think he tried to get the Weinsteins to do it, and they passed. Yeah, so let's get into the film itself, because it's a departure for Smith in terms of his previous work. Saul, do you want to give us a quick rundown of the film?
Yeah, it's Kevin Smith not making a comedy for, I think, the first time in his career. Mm-hmm. Making an attempt at a horror thriller. It is basically Westboro Baptist Church, but with all the names changed for legal reasons. What is it? Some kids do a kind of... They go on a weird online website to meet loose women.
Not like we all do. Like the TV show. They meet that woman out of Birds of a Feather, and that one who used to do the news.
They go online, they find a woman who's up for sleeping with all three of them. They're sort of lame teenagers who are like, yeah, dude, let's lose our virginity together, dude. And So they drive off to go and sleep with this woman, and she drugs them, and they get abducted. And it turns out that this Westboro Baptist Church analogy just sort of systematically trying to cleanse the world of people like them who are gay, I guess, except they're not gay.
We hear about things that have been going on, as in these gay men have been killed, and the Westboro analogy of really kind of anti-gay.
And when they get there, there's a gay person who's...
These teen boys who we're following, there's no gayness there. So it's more about loose morals, and I don't know, like what are they, like 17-year-old boys who are trying to get laid? Like what?
Is it just Kevin Smith just trying to ask whether or not it's gay if he has a foursome? Is that what he's asking?
It does feel a bit messy from a plot point of view, as if like, why not just make it about a gay thing, or make it about a moral thing, or sex thing?
I think it works. Yeah. It she says, "Do you want to dance with the devil?" and all that.
In the pale moonlight.
I was genuinely shocked, like the bit where Kevin Pollak shows up and he's quite a knowable face and he's quite charismatic, and I thought, oh, he's obviously going to be the sort of funny sort of comic relief. And then when he gets taken out, I was genuinely shocked. I was like, I wasn't expecting that, and it jolted me, and I was like, is this film better than I remembered? And I was just a bit harsh the first time, but then no, it becomes apparent that he doesn't really know what to do with that situation. The action scenes are very suspenseful. It just feels like...
I tell you what, it was better than I remembered. In case anyone is listening to this who hasn't seen it, basically after a while it descends into a sort of hostage situation with essentially Westboro Baptist Church versus the authorities who
ATF,
are going into... Yeah.
Now, you guys have both used the word horror to describe this film, which I find interesting, because not only was it not horrifying anyway, I'm not sure it was meant to be. Was it?
It was meant to be.
It was marketed as horror.
Yeah, I remember Kevin Smith saying he was gonna try and make a horror film, and he wanted to make something legitimately scary and blah 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 blah. I think ultimately it's more of a thriller, but
yeah.
I'm not a big fan of thriller as a genre, to be honest. I find it a very confusing label. I
mean, perhaps we should leave that conversation until we deal with Tusk, because I have a similar problem there.
If the film is about these teenagers being locked in that church and it was like a real tense cat and mouse film all the way through.
The first act feels like it's supposed to be a horror, yeah. I do think one of the strengths of this film is John Goodman's character. I think
absolutely,
that's the one that works all the way through. There's a consistency through it. And I really do like, we'll be talking about this quite soon, but I watched Vice yesterday. And what I do like is this kind of banality of evil, where people do terrible things, but they're not terrible people necessarily. They're just doing things, and there's a disconnect somehow. And I think John Goodman really represents that very nicely, because he's obviously a good person. He's questioning these things, but then he is going to follow orders. And ultimately, when he doesn't, it's because it's in a very extreme situation. And what happens? Nothing. He just gets promoted. And I like that kind of journey of this, the kind of government side of just evil things. You could make a great film about like that John Goodman central character. You open with him getting that phone call in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And then you kind of follow his story all the way through. You have the Michael Parks preacher bit, but that could be a much better film, I think. I don't think the boys need to be in there at all.
It's a weirdly structured film, isn't it? It's weird that he approached the structure in the way that he did, Kevin Smith, because I think it is just meant to be twists and turns, but it just feels like a very disjointed film.
If these three films that we're going to look at today are going to tell us anything, it's that Kevin Smith knows nothing about film structure and doesn't understand how a script is supposed to work.
I think that's it. He doesn't want to do the second draft or even the third draft by the looks of it. I think the thing is, the first act's got a great flow to it. It's momentum to it.
Another thing I had is just a kind of loose ends, because we see that one of the teen boys, and he goes to his parents and he's like, "Oh, can I borrow the car?" And they're like, "Oh, well, don't do anything right." None of that is relevant. It's completely irrelevant. Cut that out of the film, and it wouldn't even matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's that, like, then you do another draft and you take it out, or maybe it doesn't, but then what about when you film it? What about when you edit it? That's another process of redrafting.
Can we mention the editing? I know Kevin Smith at this point is doing all the editing himself. He's been doing it for a while. It's been working fine. I think the editing in this film is really bad. I think it's really choppy and uneven.
Yeah.
And I think it's a detriment to the film.
It's not just that he was editing himself. He presented a first cut of the film at the wrap party. He was filming by day, editing in the evenings, and every day's footage, he was just editing it right there and then. So, maybe it's a rush job, but also he's never edited anything like this before.
Yeah, and I mean, this film, I don't think it's put together that well technically. I think the editing is bad. I think the cinematography is bad. It falls prey to that really frustrating thing of just shaky camera where you can barely tell what's going on, as if that's
awful digital blood as well. I hate.
Yeah,
that's just lazy.
And it's a shame because, I mean, I absolute respect for Kevin Smith for stepping outside of his comfort zone and trying to grow as a filmmaker, but he hasn't managed it yet.
There is evidence of direction here, like the visual style.
Yeah.
Even if you think that it's not done very well, there is an attempt to do something different.
Yeah, absolutely.
When the action is more intense, it's more frenetic. There's camera movement. It's definitely not just to point this at the person and shoot.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I don't want to shit on it too hard, because I thought at least he's got some themes and he's trying to do something different. I mean, he's very fortunate to get some decent actors in this as well.
Oh, it's a great cast,
Leo, Michael Parks, John Goodman.
Michael Parks is phenomenal in this. He
I think we're being quite negative. I didn't dislike this film, and Michael Parks is definitely a big part of that. John Goodman
absolutely
another. But Michael Parks' character, he does it perfectly. I think it's written well as well, though. Like, I've got to give Kevin Smith some credit. But brevity is not Kevin Smith's strong point, and there's that preaching scene where we're introduced to him could have been half of the length quite easily, and that would have been fine. Or at least have some kind of role in it that, like, measure it so that we got a journey there rather than just we're just watching this guy, because he comes across as a religious nutbag really well, but it's just like, well, I don't want to just sit here listening to a religious nutbag. This is very accurate, but now I want to move on with the plot.
I was not impressed with this film when I first watched it. I didn't like it. It just felt, I think I didn't know what to expect perhaps going in. On the rewatch, I was actually really quite enjoying it. It just sort of ran out of steam towards the end. It just started to drag and feel like, all right, going on a bit now. And my last complaint is that when Badger, the deputy, hears shots fired inside the house, he like immediately knows what that means and runs to get, his gun and everything and get shot. And that just felt very unrealistic, as well as a missed opportunity. That seems like that's when you want to add some Hitchcockian stuff into your film. He's heard gunshots.
Make it more tense. Yeah.
He sort of goes, "Oh, what was that?" I can't know his voice. It's kind of like, "Hey guys,
hey, what's
gunshots? Like? Scoob, hey Scoob, I heard gunshots on your Waco cabin, man." And then they're like, "Oh no, that wasn't gunshots. That was steam from the steamed clams or whatever." And then you have this scene where he sort of has to come and investigate, and that he sort of knows something's amiss, but he can't do anything. And
call it.
That could have been a great scene leading up to him getting shot in the exact same way. And it's just this really unrealistic moment where Michael
Parks could have said that he was watching a John Woo film or something.
Or even, we're just doing some target practice with the kids or anything. There's so many ways he could have tried to explain it, and it just really annoyed me that. Anyway, so the ending for this film, as written, had to be changed due to budgetary reasons. I think it's a big detriment to the film. I think the original ending sounds like it would have been fantastic. All things considered, I think the ending we get works and is like a pretty decent job of...
The original ending, was it supposed to, like, the rapture was supposed to come down?
Yeah, the horn sounds as it does in the film, but then it just turns out that is actually the rapture, and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse come riding down, and then this huge horseman like stabs Michael Parks with a big sword and looks at John Goodman and holds his finger up to his mouth as if to like say shh, and
don't say that we told you this.
Yeah. And it would have been a really I'm not entirely sure what it meant.
Completely bizarre.
It would have been a really cool ending, and it certainly would have meant, if nothing else, fuck these guys, they don't speak for God.
See, I would have hated it. It would have just been the most ridiculous, silly ending.
See, I love that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so do I. Like, it would have...
But I like the ending. I like the ending as we get it as well, to be honest. I think it works as a cap off to the quagmire of the film.
It's overdone, though.
Yeah, it is overdone.
Standard Kevin Smith. Like, that needs to be like a quick, like... Because the John Goodman character, like, it needs to go, oh, where was the trumpet noise coming from? Like, oh, is these kids messing about? But no, it's like a 7-minute long story.
Yeah.
These kids came from and what they were doing.
Down,
and what,
definitely.
Like, Kevin Smith just fucking never shuts up, does he?
It's how it feels like the whole thing was written and working towards. So it just feels like a bit of an anticlimax when we get the ending that we do.
I like that, though. That's what I like about it.
No, but it feels like... It doesn't feel like an intentional anticlimax. It feels like it's written to work around a budgetary issue, and that's sort of why it doesn't quite work for me. I give Red State a 6. I think it's an admirable attempt at making something, and it doesn't all quite work. But to be honest, I feel more positively about it than many of Kevin Smith's films that I've rated higher than that. I'd rather he made this sort of stuff and expressed himself. Just another 90-minute collection of dick jokes.
I agree with that to a large extent. I think Michael Parks and John Goodman are the ones that really make this thing happen, though. I give it a 7.
I'd probably go with Saul's same score as you with Saul, 6 out of 10. And I really don't like shitting on Kevin Smith because I do actually like him. I like him as a personality. He represents something that I'm quite fond of. A lot of filmmakers like Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez, where he was like, I know you talked about on the past podcast, but just that, no, fuck it, just get up and do it attitude, which I admire about him.
I think you've raised something there, actually, which I wanted to talk about. Because listening back to our last 2 episodes, looking at Kevin Smith, we've made a lot of real, like, big statements and a lot of assumptions about his personality and character, and I just feel like we should justify that a little bit because
I'm about to.
I think normally it would be supposition on our parts, but Kevin Smith is so out there and public about who he is and what he does that, like, I've been following for years, that I feel like I do really know who he is quite well. Like, I've got a good insight into what he's doing and why he's doing it. And so I think that I just want to justify why we kind of make quite some very personal cutting statements about him and his wife.
So Red State, I think Kevin Smith struggled to get a decent distribution deal on it, and he did the quite revolutionary thing of deciding, I'm going to self-distribute, I'm just going to take it on a tour around the US. I'll do like a little Q&A before each showing. We'll charge, obscene amounts of money for people to go and see it on the grounds that I'll be there.
And Kevin Smith goes round and does Q&As and sells out massive audiences anyway. So it's not. So like
it was a continuation of that, and so that's a business model he's really developed that he's been working with. And his next film using that model was the animated Jay and Silent Bob Super Groovy cartoon movie, which he wrote but didn't direct. And it might just be the most offensively lazy bit of hack shit he's ever produced. Have you guys seen it?
Yes.
I didn't watch it, I'm afraid. I didn't get around to it.
I get the idea. It's a nice little idea. Make an animated film about Jay and Silent Bob. Do the whole superhero thing. Do the Blunt Man and Chronic comic adaptation, I suppose. It's just shit. It's just unforgivable. It's so bad. I struggle to believe Kevin Smith wrote it. It's hard to imagine it's the same guy who wrote the other films that he's made that wrote this. It feels like it really feels like a first draft. It feels like a first draft bashed out whilst high over about 2 hours. It's one of his mates animated the whole thing, so it was one person doing all the animation, and the film suffers for it because it is hideous. It is fucking horrible to look at.
It's the level of, it's the sort of level
I've produced better animation than this.
But it's the sort of level like you would send me a YouTube video and like, oh, look at this funny thing, and someone's done a little animation like in their spare time.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, yeah, that's a nice little funny thing. The animation's not good, but I'm forgiving of that because it's just a little thing. Whereas this, if you're gonna try and put it together as a film, and it's got these characters that have a long lineage that you can sell it as well. You know you can find a market for it.
A friend of mine went to see this when he toured it through the UK, and I think it was about 45 quid for a ticket. And yeah, Kevin Smith did his little Q&A session. But I mean, imagine spending £45 to watch this shit. I would be incensed. I would be so angry. I don't know what I'd do. It's awful.
How much does Flash animation cost to download on your PC these days?
Let's see. You've got the sound mix is awful. That it's this horrible stock sound effects that are used. At one point, there's like they're looking through binoculars. This should give you a good sense of what the film's like. At one point, they're looking through binoculars and they see across the road, and there's just some lesbians having sex, and it's the same stock noise of a woman going, "Ah!" used 3 times in a row. Like, not even a different one. It's just fucking hack comedy with weird anti-feminist leanings, I should add. There's some really odd stuff in there.
But I think, I mean, am I correct that this was basically a fan who did some animated bits of like things they were talking about on the podcast?
I think
and so they would animate it and go, oh yeah, this is like a little sketch of it, which is perfect. You do a little 3-minute sketch of one of their conversations. Everyone likes it. It's funny, and the animation's a bit shit, but it's just some 19-year-old graphics student doing it. But then they gave him money to do his feature film, and it's just like, okay, the material wasn't there, the animation skill wasn't there, the professional level wasn't there.
Even if it looked like shit, I could forgive it if the writing was vaguely interesting or amusing. But it's barely over an hour long. It's 64 minutes long, this film. It is a fucking slog to get through. It feels so long. It's a chore. The plot is basically... There's a whole load of stuff to begin with where Jay and Silent Bob, we know they're going to become superheroes, so they kind of go past all these things that have set up other superheroes and classic comics, and the joke is you sort of think, oh, they're going to, there's the Green Lantern, they're going to be given this ring, and then Jay's like... Hey dude, you're a fag, and like walks off, and that's the joke, and they don't become the Green Lanterns.
I think on paper that works. That these things that's oh look, they're going to become superheroes. Oh no, it's not that. And then when we see the supervillains how they're created, and it's like they always end up in the same low, they drop into a vat of acid kind of thing. I think these things on paper work. It's just they're not well put together in this film. It's not directed well.
Maybe
the pacing is completely off.
Oh, the pacing is horrendous. Yeah,
I think you could really tighten this up and have a nice little skit. The writing would have to be a bit better, but I think the concepts are there.
The voice acting as well. I mean, oh god, it's just...
Sorry, is this related to the Clerks animated spin-off, or is the animation...
No, it's completely different. Clerks didn't have the best animation, but it's much nicer than this. Yeah, Clerks look like professionally animated stuff, you know? And just stupid shit. Jay and Silent Bob ultimately become superheroes because they win $10 million on a scratch card and decide to become basically Batman. I don't think $10 million is enough money to build a Bat cave and have all those gadgets and buy a mansion and everything else they do. It's stuff like that. You just think, Kevin Smith, you're not that smart, are you? It's just...
But you know, this was like literally a bloke in his basement, like animating it himself. You know, it wasn't a professional production really. It's the fact that it's being sold as one that's...
I'm more forgiving of the shit animation because of it. I think it's just really badly written. I know some of it probably would be tightened up, but it would still be... I kind of expect something as good as Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back in the writing, you know?
As good as that.
And it's... and I don't know, maybe Jay and Silent Bob was largely funny because you had people like Will Ferrell who were just allowed to kind of improv and make it better on set. But I don't know, it's just shit, isn't it? Do you have anything else to add to that? Or
I gave it a 4, so I must have had a couple of laughs out of it.
I gave it a 2.
It sounds like I dodged a bullet.
Yeah. I give it a 2, and I think if it weren't for Cop Out, I think this would be Kevin Smith's worst film, but I'd probably rather sit through this again. It's not as long.
All right. Well, okay. What's next?
Hello, listener. I do hope you are enjoying the finale of our Kevin Smith series of episodes, our little season here. As you may or may not have heard, we've launched a Patreon account, mainly just to try and cover the cost of running the show. So we're not looking for a massive amount of money. We're not being greedy or anything. You only have to chuck us $1 a month. Although if you want to donate more, that'd be lovely. But for as little as $1 a month, you'll get access to a whole load of stuff. Most notably, our Diminisodes. We're pumping out Diminisodes, mini episodes of the show, whenever possible. So far, there are 3 up covering films that we've been tying episodes into. So we've got one for Mary Poppins Returns, we've got one looking at Stan and Ollie, and we've done one looking at Glass. So head over to patreon.com/dimreturns and check it out. Anyway, back to the show.
He then went on to make his next proper film, Tusk, which is he seemed to think it was brilliant that he made the first ever film based on a podcast, because he and Scott Mosier, I'm assuming, were on Smodcast and started joking about this. Well, it was based on a real life incident, wasn't it? There was an advert posted in some sort of Craigslist type thing where a guy was looking for a roommate, and it was free rent, but you had to be willing to dress up as a walrus and live as a walrus. And it wasn't real. The guy just posted it as a joke, but
obviously
it went viral regardless.
It's not real.
Kevin Smith riffed a film on an episode of Smodcast based on it, and they thought it was really funny.
We've talked about this before, where we've occasionally will decry a film because it's like, this is something we would come up with on this podcast. But this is literally the sort of thing that some people just pissing about come up with on a podcast.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, look at this silly idea we're throwing out. And look at this silly idea.
I like the concept for this film. I like films that are weird and stupid, and like, imagine if they made a film like that. That'd be weird, wouldn't it? And then they actually make it. That's my kind of film. So the fact that this is a film about a man who wants to abduct some more people and turn them into walrus monstrosities, because he's got some weird link to walruses in his past.
Yeah.
I like that. I think that's a good idea for a film.
Is it well carried out though?
Well,
such a great idea. This is gonna be hilarious, and then, when it's actually executed, you're like, oh yeah.
I don't know. My main issue with this film is that the main character is a podcaster, and he does a podcast called The Not See Party, and it seems to be a weird analogy for Smodcast or something. But I can never buy that it's a successful show, because it seems like the shittiest, worst podcast I could... Like, it's a shit concept. The hosts are unbearable. It isn't funny. They seem really self-indulgent, and they laugh at themselves too much. Basically, it does seem just like Smodcast. But
well, isn't that him being self-deprecating though? Isn't he sort of acknowledging the fact that he's
maybe?
Sort of
but it's just,
is that why he gets his just desserts? Like, is he sort of acknowledging that? Well, this guy's a fucking douchebag, and like.
Well, off the bat, can I say I think this is the first Kevin Smith film out of his whole filmography that is well directed. I think he's got to the point where he can sort of direct something now. There are a few points where he gives into like self-indulgence completely, but I think for the most part, the way this is put together is well directed.
I agree with that, and the production design, the cinematography is pretty on point, and that, like, this is what I was saying earlier about like the theme of the last 2 films, well, the Red State and Tusk, is that the openings, like, it's got momentum. I'm hooked, and it's just he loses his way when the plot actually has to kick in the second act. But yeah, I like Michael Parks in it as well. I like he's weird and creepy. It's just it just gets boring. I'm
gonna have to disagree with you a little bit. I don't know if this is evidence that he can direct particularly. yeah, some nice production design and a cinematographer who can shoot something. I'm still not convinced that Kevin Smith is that involved with the cinematography, to be perfectly honest with you. And I think in terms of character progression and the script and the choices that are made, I don't think this is well directed, because I don't know what tone it is. I don't even know what this film is.
I think the performance is on point. I think the dynamics between the actors are directed very well.
The performances are fine. Yeah, I mean in terms of, what the fuck is this film? It's not a horror. It's not really a comedy. Is it trying to be both or either? I don't know.
I think it is a bit of both. I think it is legitimately a horror film,
a horror comedy, but it's not scary, and it's certainly not fucking funny. Not.
I think it's quite horrific in places conceptually.
It's definitely deliberately comedic. There's lots of comedy in there. But it's not shot as a comedy. There's definitely a lot of horror genre elements, but it's certainly not shot as a horror. So what is it?
Well, why do you want to put everything in a box, Alan?
I wouldn't disagree with it not looking like a horror. When he's in the house and he's like, obviously, I think that is pure sort of. He's going for that Eli Roth, human centipede type horror. I think he is trying to do it. It's just that he hasn't.
But it's not there. It's not consistent. It's just something missing.
Not consistent,
maybe it's the score.
No,
maybe it's the cinematography is doing it. The production design is doing it, but then the script isn't there with it. There's something that's not balancing here.
Because there could have been some shocking reveals which don't pull off. Like when his leg is being chopped off, that could have been really creepy. Like if you ever watched Requiem for a Dream and he finds out he hasn't got an arm at the end.
I think he
could have had that moment there with the leg being chopped off. It just that could have been a shocking moment, but it just felt inevitable.
I think it's quite unpleasant though. I think it works as horror. I think that whole scene when Michael Parks won't let him go. I think a lot of this film is very unpleasant. I think it does body horror quite well in that sort of.
But that your reveal point where he's in the walrus suit looks shit, and it looks comedy, and it does not look horror.
But it's got a sense of humour about what it's doing. That doesn't stop either from working. The bit when he's being forced to swim, and then he goes underwater and he sees the skeleton of previous victims. I think that is legitimate horror.
I'll tell you why that doesn't work for me as well. This is a big point, and he gets turned into a walrus halfway through the film. And it's too early, because at that point it switches going. It's not about him anymore. It's about the guys trying to chase him and Johnny Depp and all that. Yeah. But also, once he's that far down that road, even if they go in and rescue him and they kill Michael Parks and they come and dramatically rescue him, he's completely fucked. He's never going to be. He's never just going to walk away from this and be okay. Yeah. And so it's we've got no stakes anymore, because all we're doing is reveling in this bizarre thing.
Yeah, that's where it's sort of he could have just had it more and more. He should have took a leaf out of watching Misery or something, and had more scenes with Justin Long trying to escape, or some sort of real tension and conflict. But no, it does go from him trying to escape by calling up his girlfriend and his mate, and then that's it. Then he just gets turned into a wolf. You don't even see a gradual transformation, like something from The Fly or something like that. Yeah, where you could have seen it bit by bit.
You still want them to stop Michael Parks, because he's just going to keep doing it again and again. But I know what you mean. Really... I think on the plus side, it gives the film really good pacing in the first half. There are some serious pacing issues once Johnny Depp shows up.
Well, that's the thing. The second half of the film kicks in.
Was that Johnny Depp? I thought that was Inspector Clouseau.
Well, that's it. The second half of the film kicks in, and it's it's Peter Sellers' film now. What's going on? This is a completely different film.
Yeah, it does come out of nowhere, doesn't it? I don't know what that was all about.
Yeah, so there's this direct down the lens shot of Genesis Rodriguez, is that her name? The woman in the film.
Yeah.
And she's doing this little emotional monologue, looks like a showreel scene. And then there's this whole subplot where she's sleeping with the mate, which is not relevant to anything at all, not important. Yeah. But just that shot in itself, that direction, suddenly it's like a totally different film. Why are we having this really intense moment? What Kevin Smith just seems to pick a scene and then pick a directorial style and then shove that on it, and there's no tone, there's no consistency.
I really like that whole subplot, and I really like the dynamic between the characters in this film. I think it's quite interesting. There's more going on than you typically get in one of Kevin Smith's films. The fact that there's this weird love triangle thing going on, and
it's not a weird love triangle. These two are going out. She's having an affair with his best mate, and he doesn't even know it, so it's not relevant to his character. It doesn't affect what he does or how he does things. It doesn't even affect what they do or how they approach it, because they're still completely trying to save him and they love him. It's not like they're going, fuck him, we can be together now.
I like the subplot between him and her, where she's talking about how he's changed, like his personality's changed since he's got fame. That felt real. That felt like that might be coming from a real place. I think that's them scenes like, he's making Justin Long actually feel more human. And then you know, if you would have had more scenes of feeling sort of having him being tortured and stuff, or going through psychological torture, and had that scene at sort of more early on, you feel like you know where he's sort of coming from. But then he just flashes back with him just being a dick, and he's like, I'm going to get roadhead when I'm out there.
And we do get that moment when he rings up and he's like, oh, God, like he's in a terrible situation. He's like, I just miss you. I want you, like, your help and all this. That's the only little moment we get of him going, like, this experience has made me realise what's important in my life or whatever, right? And obviously we never get that because the ending is such that we don't get enough of a sense of what's going on with him. The other thing is that, you know, the way that Justin Long plays this character, although done very well and is very funny, the character's an arsehole.
Yeah.
And even when he's dealing with like the two store clerks who are being dicks, he still comes off worse than them, you know? It's like,
completely, yeah.
So, but that's obviously deliberate. Justin Long's improving a lot. It's very funny.
I think Justin Long's great in this, but I'm a big fan of Justin Long. It's nice to see him again. It felt like he kind of fell off the radar around this point. So,
but let's address the walrus in the room here. Michael Parks once again steps up and just delivers one of the finest performances that a film doesn't deserve.
It's completely and utterly, I found my, Johnny Depp to my Tim Burton, my De Niro to my Scorsese. He's definitely having one of those moments off the back of Red State. And I think this film might have killed that dead in its tracks, but it certainly seems like, this worked really well last time, let's do it again. And it did work really well, let's do it again. And I think it works well here. Yeah,
and it's a completely different character. We've seen Michael Parks before. He embodies a character. He can change himself totally. And again, brevity is not Kevin Smith's thing, and so this scene where they finally meet goes on for about 20 minutes of them just talking at each other.
I like all that. The one scene in this film...
I like the scene. I like the scene because they're both playing off each other really nicely. It's just too long for the pacing of the film.
The one scene I cannot stand in this film, the one thing I'll agree with that is shite and is just unforgivable that it's in this film, is when there's it feels like a 20-minute flashback to Johnny Depp meeting Michael Parks and him doing a kind of simpleton act, and it's just unbearable. It should have been about a minute long. It goes on and on and on, and I just don't know what they were thinking. It's...
But did you like the performance?
No. Rewatching this film, because I think the first time round I was just not a fan of Johnny Depp being in it. It just felt like this bizarre tangent that sort of killed the film dead in its tracks. Watching it again, I was a lot more on board with, this weird Inspector Clouseau figure.
I think it's just a very over-the-top, like Inspector Clouseau style big comedy character. And I'm not sure that's what this film is. Yeah, but then I'm not sure what this film is. Because I think The Walrus falls into the same category as that, but then the rest of the film doesn't.
I think The Walrus falls into a different kind of over-the-top and extreme, though. It's not cartoonish. It's
there's a moment. There's a moment where that reveal moment where we kind of go from a close-up and it's like a sudden pullback and we see him as the walrus in the big thing. You know the shot I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That felt like the money shot on one of those fake trailers in the middle of a Quentin Tarantino double bill.
Yeah, but I want to see all those fake trailers adapted to feature length.
Well, see, I don't, because I think they won't work at all.
I thought Machete was brilliant.
See, I don't want to see any of them because it'll just be a silly joke dragged out to a film.
That's what I like in a film. That's what I'm into.
I don't know. I think high spec concepts are fine as long as they're executed with a decent narrative. Whereas this, I think it's too early on. It's revealed that he's a walrus, and at that point you're like, oh, it's a man in a walrus costume. How does he make this more interesting? Well, we'll show Michael Parks having to train it, but none of them scenes are funny or scary. So it just feels. It feels like you're watching an aftermath of when something terrible happens in a horror
I'm
film.
alright with that. I don't mind that. I've seen enough films building up to the horrible moment. I'm alright wallowing
You're such a
in
Kevin Smith apologist. You're such a late third term Kevin Smith apologist. That's what you are.
Yeah? Well, what do you give it out of 10? Come on.
I gave it 5.
Ooh.
I've got to probably give it a 4, to be honest. Maybe lower, 3 out of 10.
Ooh,
Well,
ouch.
you know what, guys? This is going to really upset you. This is my third favourite Kevin Smith film after Clerks
After Jay and Silent
Clerks
Bob
2.
Strikes Back.
So I give it a 7 out of 10. And I think it's a better film than many of his others. I think it's better than Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, easily. I'd take this over Dogma, personally. I think Dogma's every bit as messy and full of flaws as this is, but ultimately it kind of works and comes out the right side of... I like it. I like Tusk.
See, I was going to revisit some of his older films, but I didn't want to be honest. I thought, let them just be the memory, because I thought, has he always been this bad? And I just don't want to acknowledge it.
It is very different to his early stuff.
I don't think it is. I think it's always been this bad. And this is just him sort of pointing it in a different direction, and I'm more a fan of where he goes with it here.
Okay.
Yeah, with that in mind, I was primed to be quite excited for Yoga Hoses.
Right. Now, I've dropped off the Kevin Smith train a few years back. I don't listen to the podcast anymore. I don't really keep up with what he's doing. So when Yoga Hoses came out, it passed me by. I didn't really get a big release.
Well, I was going to say it's barely. Again, it was another one of these films that I think only got toured, by Kevin Smith himself. It's very difficult to track down. I think you can get it on demand platforms
and because
now,
of that, because there was not a big to do about it, I didn't even know if it had been a particular success or anything. I basically didn't know anything about this film. I had an idea that it was the two girls and his daughter and all that.
Yeah, the two girls that we see in Tusk. Kevin Smith made a huge song and dance after Tusk about how it was the start of his Truenorth Trilogy. He was going to make 2 more films. One called Yoga Hoses, about the 2 girls from the store, who we should mention are played by Kevin Smith's daughter and Johnny Depp's daughter.
Who have been friends since childhood. They've been at school together and all that. And I think there's legitimate chemistry between them. Yeah.
Well, that's why Johnny Depp's in Tusk.
Yeah, because it's just like when one of your daughter's friends' dad is Johnny Depp, you can call him up and say, hey, do you want to be in a film? You can do whatever character you want, and I won't question it whatsoever.
I just pictured Johnny Depp and Kevin Smith at a family barbecue, laughing and smiling at their daughters playing in the field or grass, the garden or whatever, and be like, oh, we should put them in a movie. Yeah, we've got the fucking money to do that. We should do that. That'll be great.
Well, I don't think that's much of a joke, is it? I think that's
probably what happened. Yeah, and the third part of the trilogy that is supposedly still coming out, but I don't think it's ever going to get made, sadly, because it sounds like it'd be the best one for me, was going to be Moose Jaws, which was going to be a remake of Jaws with a moose.
Do you know what? If he did it plot, beat by beat plot.
I think that's what it's going to be.
Actually just crossed out the words like quint and shark with moose and just recreated that, it might still be a good film, but he wouldn't. He would go off on a fucking self-indulgent...
The opening of the film, he said, is going to be, or was going to be... The opening of Jaws is that person swimming and getting eaten, isn't it? And it was just going to be Jay and Silent Bob getting killed in the same exact fashion. Yoga Hoses. This got awful reviews. And I think that kind of killed its...
See, I didn't even know that because, like I say, I didn't really know much about what was going on. And so when I watched this film, which was just a couple of days ago, I decided not to read anything about it. I thought I'll go in cold, only with my own perceptions of Kevin Smith here. And, well, what did I get?
Because I actually quite liked Tusk. I thought, that's all right. I'll probably quite enjoy this too. I like what he's doing now. I'm on board with it. And this looks, madcap and silly enough. Nazi sausages, brilliant. Ooh, boy.
I don't even know.
I mean, well, so the 2 central performances, they're daughters, not really actors. Johnny Depp's daughter is unsurprisingly better than Kevin Smith's. They're, they.
I'm happy to
all right.
happy to go on record here. I think they come across very well in this film.
Yeah.
I think they look like perfectly good actors. If this film achieves anything, it helps them get another role, then that's fine, I think.
Yeah.
But they certainly come out of this better than anyone else.
Yeah, I'll give it that. Justin Long is in this film. I'm surprised at how many people are in it, actually. But yeah, Justin Long comes back as a yoga teacher called Yoga Bear? Is that his name? I can't even remember.
Yeah.
One of the only vaguely amusing moments in the film is that Warner Brothers lawyers keep harassing him on the phone because he's called Yoga Bear and he doesn't understand why that's copyright infringement or something. Yeah.
Again, Justin Long doing a perfectly decent job, obviously improving a lot, and that's all right.
You feel bad for all the cameos in this film, to be honest, because it's all these people who, it must be like how people felt when they watched Ben Affleck and Matt Damon and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and it's like, they've come back to help their mate out, and this is what they're in now, and that's how I felt when there's a lot of cool cast members in this film. Haley Joel Osment comes back, and that's just embarrassing for everyone, including him, but he's probably not above that, to be honest. But Tony Hale, Natasha Lyonne, playing the parents of one of them, Stanley, Jason Mewes, all these people, Kevin Conroy.
Well, with the Stan Lee cameo, do you think Stan Lee just didn't remember if he'd ever written a book called Yoga Brothers?
On paper, I should love this film. It's stupid and nonsensical, but it's just done so badly. It's awful. And basically, my thesis is my wrap up of this film is: imagine if Kevin Smith made Clerks, but instead of the conversations that are quite witty and interesting, they were all that scene from Tusk with Michael Parks doing a simpleton act with Johnny Depp that go on for 20 minutes. It's that for the whole fucking film. And then at the end, for no reason, Kevin Smith plays a Nazi sausage with some of the worst green screen special effects I've ever seen, I should add.
I would describe it as a cinematic exercise in Kevin Smith trying to understand his daughter's generation, or just his daughter in general. Oh
man, so much of it comes across like an old man who doesn't know what Instagram is. It's
he's writing dialogue for a teenage girl, and he's I don't know if he's trying to like a mix between Gremlins and Juno or Clueless or something, but it's just what was he thinking with the fucking Instacan thing where it's it's supposed to be a reference to social media, but then he's using 8-bit
I was gonna say
music.
It looks like the internet from 1992.
Plus it doesn't add anything. It doesn't give us a bit of information that we wouldn't otherwise know. It's not consistent throughout the film.
Why would you introduce every single fucking character with that? It's like something.
Look, guys. I think you've missed the central conceit of this film. There's Canadians, right? When they say about, they pronounce it, and that's hilarious, right? So, what more do you want? But this nothing makes sense about this film. There's the plot comes out of nowhere and then disappears just as quickly.
There's no setup. There's this whole. First, it starts off about being these teenagers doing their normal shit, and you think, fair enough, this is quite boring, but I assume it's setting stuff up, it's getting somewhere.
Clerks, isn't it?
Then it goes into Clerks mode, and it's them in a shop, and you think, all right, he's kind of doing a soft Clerks thing. I can get on board with that. The boys come over from the party. All right, this is cool. Then suddenly they're Satanists who want to kill them. That comes out of nowhere. And all right, well if that's what the film's about, fine. Oh, but no, then some Nazi fucking sausages show up, but you don't even know what they are. It's just Kevin Smith shows up.
Explain what they are until much later on.
A 1 foot tall thing going, see Kyle, and you just think, what the fuck was that? And then when they when they stamp on the sausages, glow in the dark confetti comes out or something. What the fuck?
I thought it's supposed to be sauerkraut, but I thought it was McDonald's fries or something. I was like, what is that supposed to be? If he wanted to make a Gremlins type film, and it was just about and he had it set up pretty quickly that these were genetically modified Nazi sausages, and it's just them two stuck in a store trying to survive. It might have been, it probably would have still been shite, but at least I would have known when the plot was going, and
That, I agree. Yeah, it needed some setup, and I think there's a couple of attempts at setup earlier on where we see someone out in the woods attacked by one of them, but it's shot so badly you can't tell what the fuck's going on. You don't know what you're supposed to be looking at. It's just out of fucking nowhere.
Genuinely, there was a point here, so I was like, did I miss a scene? Did I like, because I was illegally downloading this. I thought, have I got a dodgy copy or something? Because something's missing here. But no, it wasn't. It was just not explained where these sausages came from or why they're dealing with them.
Well, then there's all this bullshit backstory about Canadian Nazis that sort of tries to justify it, and ultimately they end up dealing with, is it Ralph Garman? Is that the guy?
Yeah.
Who plays this Nazi villain? So, I don't know who Ralph Garman is. I assume he's an impressionist. Is that right?
he's one of the co-hosts.
Yeah, he co-hosts
podcast.
Hollywood Babylon with Kevin Smith. So he's not. I don't think he's an actor per se, but he does act. And then obviously they found out he could do a couple of impressions, and thought, right, that's a good enough concept.
I like that guy's Edwin impression. Is it Edwin, the guy who's
I assumed it was him, and I thought that's a fucking obscure voice to be busting out alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger, and what was Kevin Smith thinking casting himself as a Nazi sausage when he can't?
It was just
he can't
so
do it's just. I was watching it thinking, whoever's playing these is shit, and then it's Kevin Smith. Okay. There you go.
The worst bit for me was when they pull this sausage in half, and then you see him on the floor, and he's there, and then he looks at his legs over on the other side, and he goes, "Mein Kampf." And I was like, "What? What the fuck are you doing?"
The thing is, it just goes to show, like, that.
It's just like, are you just saying the only German word you know?
I mean, I wouldn't mind it if it really embraced that level of stupidity. That's the sort of thing. And I assume with Tusk, they riffed the idea for a film that was, like, for a riff, quite a good, coming up with a film on the spot. For Yoga Hosers, I don't think they riffed an idea for a film on the podcast. I think they just, judging from the audio clip they drop in the end credits again, I think they just decided that the phrase Yoga Hosers was really funny when it obviously isn't, and were crying with laughter saying it.
I had to Google what that meant. Like,
it's Canadian slang, isn't it? He's the stoner Guillermo del Toro, by which I mean every few weeks he announces a new project that he's making next, and then it never happens, and 1 out of 10 films he announces actually seems to get made. And so I don't know if it's that surprising that he had these grand plans for Moose Jaws and a trilogy and blah 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 that never materialized and probably never will, because he seems to just get very easily distracted, and Jay and Silent Bob reboot seems to be a response to his heart attack, if anything, kind of reinvigorating him and wanting him to kind of...
I don't know. I reckon when he was having that heart attack, I reckon he saw the fucking bright light, and is it St. Peter was like, "Did you meet Yoga Hosers?" And he was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Get back on fucking Earth and make something. If that's your last film, Kevin, that's not fair on you, is it? Get back on Earth and start making." It's just dreadful. It's just, and it was not only was it dreadful, it's just boring.
Yeah,
it was just sort of like,
that's the worst thing about it. It's a film that constantly throws weird shit at the screen to the point that it should be impossible to make it as trying to watch. But this is such a fucking chore of a film. It's so boring. I give it 3 out of 10, which almost feels too generous, honestly. But yeah, I think I do prefer what he's doing here to Cop Out and super groovy cartoon movies. So I've got to reflect that in the score.
I also gave it 3 out of 10. Definitely the worst thing he's made, in my estimation.
Am I allowed to give a 0 out of 10? Because
give it a 1.
1 is that.
I'll give it a 1, and that's generous. That's just for showing up. That's for writing your name on the test paper. Just 1. Dreadful. It's the worst film I've seen in years. It really is.
It's yeah. I mean, I think that's a justified 1.
Yeah.
So after Yoga Hosers, He did a little segment in a film called Holidays. Have you seen that?
No.
It was a horror anthology, with each segment being inspired by, Valentine's Day or Christmas and that sort of thing. And Kevin Smith did a segment. So I watched it thinking, well, everything in it's probably going to be shit, but I bet Kevin Smith's segment will be fun and worth watching it for, probably. Yeah. So Kevin Smith did the segment on Halloween. He got given the big one, I guess. And it's shit. It's really shit. It's about a load of cam girls who are sort of being led by the digital equivalent of a pimp and then sort of turn on him. It's just really shit. I don't know what's happened to the guy. He just can't make stuff anymore. It's really shit. It felt more coherently written and directed than other stuff he's done for a while. It felt more like maybe he did it while he was sober, but it's not worth watching. I give Holidays a 4 out of 10 if you care. So, like I say, Kevin Smith constantly announces stuff that never gets made. Clerks 3 died dead in its tracks, so that, to be fair, was just because Randall couldn't be bothered doing it, which is fair enough. Jeff Anderson. Mallrats 2, which turned into a TV series, couldn't get funding. Then he, at one point, he basically went to see Book of Mormon at some point and decided it was the greatest thing he'd ever seen, and he wanted to make a musical inspired by religion. So he announced he was making a film called Hell in a Handbag, which was going to be about... I mean, this sounds incredible, but after Yoga Hosers, I don't know if I trust Kevin Smith to do anything high concept anymore. This was going to be a film, it was going to be a musical about a giant rapturing Jesus where humanity teams up with hell to battle it and stop it from destroying Earth. Which, to me, that sounds incredible. But it also sounds like something that's going to cost too much money for Kevin Smith to even come close to being able to ever produce. And I don't think I trust Kevin Smith to source or God forbid, write original music either. Book of Mormon works because Trey Parker's shown himself to have musical chops throughout his career. Kevin Smith's just going to go, oh, that mate of mine who hosts one of the podcasts on the network. You do silly songs on the podcast sometimes, don't you? Do you want to do a whole film's worth of musical numbers?
As you've said already, I think, Saul, I'm dying to see whatever else he comes up with. I'm really all in favour of him carry on producing things just to see what happens, but that doesn't mean it'll be good.
I'm quite disappointed that he's doing Jay and Silent Bob reboot because it just seems too safe and easy, but I mean, maybe that's what he needs right now. It'll probably be the best film he's made in a while. I kind of just want to see him do weird shit. Another film he announced, which was going to be his next film for a while, is called Kilroy Was Here, and was going to be, that Kilroy Was Here graffiti that was popular in the 80s. It's basically based on that. It's going to be a weird sort of post-apocalyptic film about some resistance or some nonsense, basically, was the idea. But I don't know. He was going to make a Krampus horror film at one point as well, a Krampus horror film that I think isn't happening because some other people made Krampus. He's always announcing shit, and it looks like none of it's going to happen. He was going to do a film called Hit Somebody, and then that became a mini-series, and then that was based on a song, and it was about ice hockey players.
Hockey, yeah.
Maybe that's what he should do. Maybe he should just make a hockey, because obviously he's got a passion for hockey, so maybe he should just try and make a comedy sports movie.
Well, that was his attempt at it, yeah. It just never
I
came
can see
together.
that working, though, just going a bit more mainstream again.
Well, if we're going to pitch a new film for Kevin Smith to make here, can I suggest he continues adapting podcasts to film, and he just maybe moves away from his own self-indulgent stuff and maybe takes something we've done on the show?
Yeah.
Maybe Scottish Bond, the movie. Could that work? Jay and Scottish Bond.
I don't know if we come up with anything that we have had a few shark film things, Jaws tie-ins that he'd definitely like. He loves a bit of
man,
Jaws.
yeah, Gary Lineker eating crisps.
I think if we're going to try and predict what Kevin Smith does next, we have to take into account what's going on in his life, which is, the big thing is that he had a heart attack. Was this last year, was it? It was within a year ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, and like I say, I think Jay and Silent Bob reboot is born out of that, from what I can gather. Silent Bob's going to be, really skinny now.
Yeah, Jay and Skinny Bob.
It's going to be loads of jokes about, hey, you're not a fat fuck anymore. Just because you're not a fat fuck anymore, it doesn't mean you don't suck as much dick, man. It's going to be the same. You know exactly what it's going to be.
What is the sober Jay and Skinny Bob film? Is that going to be fun? Is that going to be?
Well, this is it. Is anything about that film gonna? Because he is basically doing Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back again, and it's a very meta, self-aware thing. But I just don't know if that's gonna be. It was stretching it enough when they did Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back the first time. I don't know if we need another film where they go to Hollywood.
Definitely.
If you're going to do another Jay and Silent Bob film, give us like Jay and Silent Bob spend the night in a haunted mansion, or Jay and Silent Bob in space, or
Yeah, like it's something like a Abbott and Costello type sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's why I thought the characters.
Jay and
the
Silent
characters work
Bob
best.
meet Frankenstein.
They work best as secondary characters anyway. So
Yeah.
I don't know if he just wants to go back to the Askew View universe and make a film where they are just in the background somewhere. I think that's where when his strengths was. I think that's when he got his popularity. He was making these films, and then these were a motif of his films, but there wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't. No one was ever. I mean, even when I used to watch like Dogma and Clerks and stuff, I wasn't ever pining for a Jay and Bob film.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think
like,
anyone was.
But this is, I mean, I think, genuinely though, I think we know that Kevin Smith writes from his own life, and, I think we're going to start seeing him questioning his own mortality a bit more. Like, he's had a brush with death. Or at
Okay,
least
so you know what we're going to get is a film about the afterlife, specifically in heaven. So not Christian afterlife spilling onto Earth, but it's going to be... Maybe he'll... do you think he could do a sequel to Dogma? I think it's a popular enough film. I think he'd struggle to pull back most of those cast members, and I don't know.
You wouldn't get...
Alan
maybe
Rickman's
a companion piece.
Yeah.
I could see him returning to the world of Dogma specifically, but the View Askew universe, to make a film set in heaven potentially. Except I think, would that be too big a budget? I guess it depends how you portray it. It doesn't have to be lavish sets, does it? It could be like The Good Place, where it's just a load of rooms.
The thing is, he's a passionate guy, and he's quite over sentimental. So I could see it being like the New Jersey Girl or something like that if he does it, and it's just going to be another flop. I reckon he's probably going to do something about a man who has a brush with death, or maybe has a terminal illness, and then it's just going to be over sentimental, and he's not going to connect with anyone with it. I think that's my prediction. I think he should just go back to writing. To be honest, for a pitch, I'd rather see him just try and make another horror film, actually, but more in the vein of Red State.
That's what I'd like. If we're really trying to come up with what we think would be good for him and the best for his career and most likely to turn out results, I think return to the View Askew universe. You write some new characters set within that world, and the main plot is about one of the characters has a brush with death. They have a heart attack or something, and it is an exploration of mortality. And it's about like someone who works at a shop or something who goes through that, and how it affects his relationships. And Jay and Silent Bob are hanging around in the background, and maybe Ben Affleck plays one of the roles. I think if he's making it at that level, it would work.
Yeah, what we said about Clerks or Clerks 2 is it's about those different periods in your life where it's just like, oh, what have I achieved? What have I done? What am I supposed to be doing? And I think when you get a bit older and you start to think about your own death, that's another step. That's another like, have I achieved what I wanted to in my life? Have I done all the things I said I was going to? If I died tomorrow, would I be satisfied? I think that's probably the next step. And I think he can write that stuff. We've seen it in Clerks 2. He can write that emotional stuff.
Yeah.
Thing is, I think for a pitch, and I've just come up with this. I think maybe he already has thought about it, but like he's so good at talking about Hollywood and his involvement with it that I probably quite like to see a disaster artist type film where he makes a film about the making of Clerks, and it doesn't have to be Clerks.
Well, that
characters.
There is a there's a film about the making of Clerks that Kevin Smith's definitely involved in. I think he's kind of helped them raise a little bit of money. I think it was largely crowd funded, but I think Kevin Smith, I think he might make a cameo in it or narrate it or something.
But I think he should be making that film.
I agree. I agree. Or if not that film, you know, a film about someone making a film who works on it. You know, someone basically that film, but not necessarily specifically.
Well, I'd love to see the film about a director having a breakdown on a set because of a actor pushing him to his limits.
I think it's called Shooting Clerks, I want to say.
That rings a bell, yeah.
He's been chewed out by the Hollywood system. He knows he can't really make it work in there. But I've not watched any of the Flash TV series that he's done. Apparently he's doing...
Well, yeah, we haven't mentioned that. He's been doing quite well directing a lot of Warner Brothers DC superhero TV shows, which I think is probably good for him. It's probably helping him hone his ability to skills, direct, you know, in a sort of professional capacity.
Maybe he could do something about Harvey Weinstein. Maybe because he's quite apologetic about that. Yeah. If he could show us because that's the next big thing that's going to come out. I mean, I think is it Stephen Berkoff? He's writing a play about Harvey Weinstein, so it's not going to be long until we start seeing. Was it not Oliver Stone? I can't remember which director it was. Said he was going to do a horror film about Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
It's probably best coming from the horse's mouth, like people who actually hung around with him, and maybe that's his
that
way
would be interesting to see, because Kevin Smith owes a lot to Harvey Weinstein, you know, in terms of his career.
He does, yeah.
And you know, professional level, I think they were very close.
I don't know. I don't know if he's addressed it. I'm sure, being as outspoken as he is and doing the podcasts that he does and all that sort of stuff, I would be amazed if he hasn't spoken at length about his feelings on the matter. But it would be interesting to kind of see a film address that somewhat. Apparently, as of presumably when this was written in 2017, all of the dividends Kevin Smith gets from his Weinstein-made films being donated to the organisation Women in Film.
It's a shame of his career, because if he'd stayed on the track of actually making witty sort of... I can only assume they're still witty, funny films, because as I said, I've not revisited them. Like, he could have been DC's Joss Whedon. Like, I reckon he really could have been the guy that could have sort of helped shape the DC Extended Universe.
I think he would have done a much, much better job than Zack Snyder. I wouldn't let him direct any of the films.
Having Kevin Smith on your writing staff for stuff like that is great. I wouldn't necessarily let him do the whole thing. I wouldn't let him direct, but I would love to get, look, here's a nice little script we've got. Can you throw some good dialogue into it, pump it up a little bit? That's what I want.
I think it'd be very good if you kind of said, Kevin Smith, like, what's your broad strokes plan for like an overarching plot, 5 films leading up to a big climax? Okay, right, you can Godfather that. We'll bring on individual writers to work on each individual film with you.
I think maybe they should just hand him one of the lesser known sort of, as an experiment, one of the lesser known sort of characters, like Blue Beetle or something.
Well,
if he happens to be listening to this, there could be a small chance that he is. That it's not coming from a place of hatred. It's coming from a place of frustration. It's coming from a place of, like, he has so much potential.
He's one of few filmmakers where I will watch everything he ever makes. He's earned that from me, and I think that says a lot.
He's slowly losing that goodwill.
Yeah.
So that is Kevin Smith's career so far. And yeah, no doubt we'll visit him again in the future. Hopefully, see what he's up to.
Yeah,
but it's
shame it ended on such a bum note with yoga hoses, isn't it? But,
yeah, well, we'll see
maybe his next film will
what the future
atone for that.
Yeah. This has been great, guys. Thanks. Thanks for joining us, Scott.
Yeah, no worries. If I do get invited back, can we talk about some films that are actually good?
You'd be surprised how little that happens on this show.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So there you go. That was Kevin Smith's season. You'll definitely want to come back next week, because we are capping off our 50 Shades of Grey Valentine's Day trilogy, which is, the last 2 episodes have been highlights of the podcast for various reasons, not particularly related to the films. So yes, come back next week. And if you can't wait a whole week, head over to our Patreon, patreon.com/dimreturns, and you will get access to extra bonus diminishing returns content for just $1 a month, and we will be forever in your debt. Thank you. Thank you, listener. Snoochie buys.